have your Bibles this morning, you'll turn with the book of Hebrews in chapter 11. Hebrews 11, and when you get there, if you'll join me in standing. Hebrews 11. And I want to start reading in verse 17. Hebrews 11 and verse 17. The Bible says, by faith Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac, and he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it was said that in Isaac shall thy seed be called, accounting that God was able to raise him even from the dead, from whence also he received him in a figure. And if you'll remain standing and turn to Genesis 22, I meant to read that first, but sometimes your mind goes into a lapse or something. And Genesis 22. In verse 1. When you get there, say amen.
Amen.
Genesis 22 and verse 1. The Bible says, and it came to pass that these things that God did tempt Abraham, and said unto him, Abraham, and he said, Behold, here am I. And he said, Take now thy son, thy only son Isaac, whom thou lovest, and get thee into the land of Moriah, and offer him there for a burnt offering upon one of the mountains which I will tell thee of. And Abraham rose up early in the morning, and saddled his ass, and took two of his young men with him, and Isaac his son, and clave the wood for a burnt offering, and rose up, and went into the place which God had told him. Then on the third day, Abraham lifted up his eyes, and saw the place afar off. And Abraham said unto his young men, Abide ye here with the ass, and I will lay, and the lad will go yonder and worship, and come again unto you. And Abraham took the wood of the burnt offering, and laid it upon Isaac his son, and took the fire in his hand and a knife, and they went both of them together. And Isaac said to Abraham his father, and said, My father. And he said, Here am I, my son. And he said, Behold the fire and the wood, but where is the lamb for a burnt offering? And Abraham said, My son, God will provide himself a lamb for a burnt offering. So they went both of them together, and they came to the place which God had told him of. And Abraham built an altar and laid the wood in order, and both Isaac and his son, and laid him on the altar from the wood. And Abraham stretched forth his hand, and took a knife to slay his son. And the angel of the Lord called unto him out of heaven, and said, Abraham, Abraham. And he said, Here am I. And he said, Lay not thine hand upon the lad, neither do thou anything to him, for now I know that thou fearest God, seeing thou hast not withheld thy son, thine only son, from me. And Abraham lifted up his eyes, and looked, beholding behind him a ram caught in the thicket by his horns. And Abraham went and took the ram, and offered him for a burnt offering in the stead of his son. And Abraham called the name of the place Jehovah Jireh, which is to say, to this day, it is the mount of the Lord shall be seen. And the angel of the Lord called unto Abraham out of heaven the second time, and he said, By myself I have sworn with the Lord, for because thou hast done this thing, and hast not withheld thy son, thy only son, that in blessing I will bless thee, and in multiplying I will multiply thy seed as the stars of the heaven, as the sand which is upon the seashore. And the seed shall possess the gate of his enemies, and in thy seed shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because thou hast obeyed my voice. Father, we thank you today for your blessings, Lord. Have your way this morning. Open our hearts and our minds to your word. Help us that we might understand, that Father, we might grow, that we might be changed, that Father, we might be challenged this morning. Father, you have your way in each and every heart. As I stand before them this morning, that Father, you use me and guide me for your purpose. In Jesus' precious and holy name we pray. Amen. I was noting yesterday that there was a some graduations taking place across the state of Tennessee. I saw some people that I knew, or a person I knew, Tennessee Tech had graduated. And I knew another person that I know of over at Nashville, Baylor University had graduated. And I'm sure there was other graduations all over the place. I saw this past week where Brother Adam Hargis' son had graduated from high school. And so I'm seeing it's a time people are graduating. Do you know you don't get to graduate unless you pass the test? Sybil wanted to get her license back for teaching. And she's got 3 tests to take. Listen, Abraham was going through a test. Before he went through this test, he had several lessons he had to learn. You can see his life as stretched out. Last week we talked about his calling. By faith Abraham when he was called. This week by faith Abraham when he was tested. There's 2 different things going on. But between the call and the test, there had to be a lot of lessons that he had to learn. He had to learn to trust God. We mentioned last week that God called him to go out to leave his country and his family. And he did. He left the country. He took the family with him. Then he finally left the family except for Lot. And he finally had to separate from Lot. Do you understand what the problem is? That God was calling out Abraham. And then Abraham had to learn to trust God in regard to his safety, because he would go to Pharaoh and say, "This is my sister," so that he wouldn't be killed. And then he'd go to Abimelech and say, "This is my sister," so he wouldn't be killed. Listen, he had to learn to trust God for his safety. And other things you find in the life of Abraham, where Abraham is learning to trust God. Listen, we also are much the same way. We need to learn to trust God. I heard this week at one of the revivals, it was mentioned, Brother Bill down at Calvary, down at Wine South. I'll get in a minute. That Samson. I didn't go to Wine South, the Calvary this week. I went to Wine South and Samson. And he, okay. But down at Samson, Brother Bill made a comment. He says, when I got saved, I raised the white flag and said, "Lord, I surrender." And I rode a little white ways, and the Lord showed me something in my life, and I had to raise that white flag again. "Lord, I surrender." And it was a continuous process. He may mention that in his life he has, and it's the same way in my life. Every so often, the Lord showed me something, and I've got to learn and then surrender that. Same thing is true in Abraham's life. But now, God has brought him to a point of a test. By the way, thinking about this message, I was sitting at Wine South, and I heard a young lady sing. I heard part of what she sang, okay? Where she was at, the piano was louder than she was, and there wasn't a mic on it. But she made comment in the song. God wasn't wanting Isaac, he wanted Abraham. Listen, the Bible talks about a lot of different things in regard to us as Christians. About us surrendering to Him. Except you hate your father and your mother, you cannot, in other words, you love Him more. Listen, here's the thing. God is wanting you. He doesn't want your money. He wants you. But honestly, if He doesn't have your money, He doesn't have you. He doesn't want your family, He wants you. But if He doesn't have your family in your heart, in your family, He doesn't have you. If there's anything that you have and hold in your heart over Him, He doesn't have you. And that is the fault in part. I want you to understand, though, this is a test. Let me take you to the book of James for a moment. It's not just a few pages over from where you are. James chapter 1. I want to show you something. Let me read you 4 verses, starting in verse 2 and ending in verse 12. 4 verses. I'm going to read verse 2, 3, and 4, and verse 12. My brethren, count it all joy when you fall into divers temptations. That's that same idea about the various testings that we will face. Knowing this, that the trying of your faith, or the testing of your faith, worketh patience. But let patience have her perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. Blessed the man, verse 12, blessed the man that endureth temptation, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life, which the Lord hath promised to them that love him. Listen, there's 3 things I want you to see in this before we go back. In verse 3, he makes mention that knowing this, the trying of your faith worketh patience. A benefit that Abraham will receive out of this test is patience. I've said it many times, and I believe it to be true, that tribulation worketh patience, but the lack of patience works tribulation. If you don't have patience, you're going to be tried a lot. Okay? If you don't believe me, go get you one item at Walmart and stand in the longest line. It will try your patience. And you can either learn patience, or you can be irritated. Or you can be troubled. Or you can be tested. And the testing of your faith, the trying of your faith, worketh patience. It will bring patience in your life. Second of all, I want you to notice in verse 4, but let patience have a perfect work, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. There's something that I noted here when I was looking at this. That the last phrase, that you may be perfect and entire, wanting nothing. Let me say this a different way. That you may be complete and entirely complete, and complete with no lack. That's what he says. That's what the words mean. That you might be complete and entirely complete and complete with no lack. That's what the testing of your faith will do for you. It will make you a complete, an entire, perfect Christian. Not that we mentioned earlier today already that none of us are perfect. That we haven't reached a point of perfection. That everything that we do and say is perfect. But the idea of a Christian who is perfect is not that my actions are great all the time. But the one that I lean on is great all the time. That's where my perfection comes from. And that's what you learn in the testing, is to lean on God. And in verse 12, I want you to note one other thing. Blessed is the man that endureth temptation. That word endureth means to stay under. You know what the problem is sometimes that when we don't learn some lessons? We don't stay under the testing. Sybil, I'm going to use her for example again. Saturday, when she goes down up here, she'll go down, then north. When she goes up to take this test, for every answer she doesn't answer, it's the wrong answer. Okay? If she puts down any kind of answer at all, she has a chance of getting it right. All right? But if she doesn't stay on that test, that if she don't answer all the questions, every question she doesn't answer is a wrong answer. You understand that? If you don't maintain the test, you don't come out with any benefit from it. She can spend 2 weeks almost now studying for this test and never take the test. And she's receiving no benefit. Our problem sometimes is we don't stay on the test. We don't endure. We don't allow the test to have its beneficial work in our life. And he says here that if you do that, for when he is tried, he shall receive the crown of life which the Lord hath promised to them that love him. Endurance brings us to the point of the crown of life. There's something else I want you to understand as well. And let me take you back to Genesis 22 for a moment. Now, I closed my Bible. I'll have to find it again. It's not hard. It's the first book of the Bible, the 22nd chapter of that book. But there it is. Here's a few things I want you to understand. Look at verse 8 for a moment. Because as much as this is about being tested, the testing is about Christ. All right? The testing is about Christ. Notice in verse 8 there in chapter 22, in Genesis. And Abraham said, my son, God will provide himself a lamb. Do you realize that that's exactly what he did? That God provided himself to be the Lamb of the world. You find in the book of Revelation it's a slain lamb. You find in the book of Isaiah 3 it's a lamb led to the slaughter. That God provides himself a lamb. And that's why Abraham said here that God would provide himself a lamb. I want you to note also that this is also a perfect place. I was checking on this because I wanted to make sure I had been told before years ago that Mount Moriah, that it's very possible that where Isaac is almost sacrificed by Abraham is a place where God provided himself a lamb. It's the place where Christ was crucified. And so I started doing some study and some research, and I found Mount Moriah is a long mountain. It's more almost a short range, if you will, but it's got a ridge to it. And on the west side, which this would be me looking at the map, it's going to be on the west of you here, okay? On the west side of Mount Moriah is a mountain called Mount Zion. That sounds familiar? You've heard of Mount Zion. Sometimes Jerusalem is called Mount Zion or Zion. And on the east side of Mount Moriah is a mountain called Mount Olivet, or the Mount of Olives. You ever heard of that one? And Mount Moriah runs, and now you kind of get an idea. Guess where Jerusalem is? And outside the gates, part of that mountain little ridge is in the gates, and part of it's outside the gates. And of course, Christ was carried outside the gates. Sacrifice. It's very possible, very probable, in fact, because God's perfection in his thinking went ahead, because he showed him the place where he wanted him to go. He took Abraham to offer up Isaac at the very place where Christ would be one day crucified. So not only did God provide him a lamb, but he took him to the perfect place, the test. That's something that really catches my attention there. Moriah, by the way, means scene of Yah, or Jehovah, if you will. And if you look over over here later, where Abraham calls the place Jehovah Jireh, and I will find it in a minute, here in verse 14, and Abraham called the name of the place Jehovah Jireh, as it is said to this day, in the mount of the Lord it shall be seen. You kind of get the idea that God is wanting to show us something. And not only that, I also want you to know that, and let me take you back to the book of Hebrews for a moment, or for a while. The rest of the message probably. I want you to know something else in verse 17. By faith Abraham, when he was tried, offered up Isaac, and he that had received the promises offered up his only begotten son. Do you notice the term? The only begotten son. Do you know who also is referred to in Scripture as the only begotten Son of the Father? See, it's pointing to Christ. The whole thing. He's the son of promise. In fact, Isaac is the son of promise. And Jesus is in the book of Galatians. In fact, Isaac and Ishmael are compared, and Isaac is presented as the son of promise, and Ishmael the son of law. Listen, Christ is the son of promise. He was the promised Messiah that would come. The test points to Christ. But listen, the test is also about faith. Notice in verse 18, of whom it was said that in Isaac shall thy seed be called. Now think about it for a moment. You're Abraham. God has come to you multiple times at this point and has said, Abraham, you're going to have a son. And in this son, your seed will be called. Listen, I want you to understand something, that you will have a multitude of children from this son that you will have. Let's go ahead and call him Isaac. From Isaac, you will receive a multitude of people as the sons of the seed. There will be multitudes that come from this son that you will have. And Isaac, all the nations of the earth will be blessed in this son. And then God comes to you. This son's not full grown yet. This son has no children. Is not married. And God comes to you and says, Abraham, I want you to offer this promised son, this son of promise, that has attached to him all these other promises that I have promised you. I want you to take this son, and I want you to spread him out on the altar, and I want you to kill him and sacrifice him to me. Now you hear, you know it from God. Abraham knew God was the one. It wasn't no flesh in here. But what God was saying in the one hand, what God now was saying on the other hand, didn't line up. But you believe God. That's what faith is, right? Faith is believing God. And you don't know how it's going to work out. That God has promised this through Isaac, that there's one hand, but on the other hand, he wants now me to offer him. But you believe God. So however God's going to do it. And in verse 19 then, the Bible says that how Abraham thought it was going to happen, according that God was, accounted that God was able to raise him up, even from the dead, from which he was also received in a figure. By the way, let me back up. Did you know that the journey from where Abraham had to make to Mount Moriah was 3 days? Did you catch that in Genesis 22? That journey that he took, that at the point where Abraham left, in a sense, Isaac was dead. God wanted his life, and he died then. And Abraham began to march to Moriah, and in 3 days, he received Isaac back alive. He was accounting God, he was raising from the dead, but which he said, the Bible says there in verse 19, that he did in a time. In a sense, Isaac was dead 3 days and rose again. Did you catch that in Genesis 22? Did you see it? I'm not going to turn back there. You have to read it for yourself. The test is about faith. And Abraham said, God promised, and God wanted, I will trust God. If this is what God wants me to do, He can raise him from the dead. That's not an issue here. God can take care of this. I don't understand, but God does. See, Abraham believed God beyond understanding. We feel like that sometimes. there's a message that I have preached several times that I take from the book of Romans and begin in chapter 11 there. And I talk about where it says all Israel will be saved. And by the way, that statement is true. But if you compare it to other scriptures and so forth, how it's true, I don't understand. I don't understand the fullness of the statement. I don't understand what he means by what he says. All I know is all Israel will be saved. That's all I know. Because why? Because I believe God. Now here's the thing. We all go through tests in our life. We all do. I told Sybil a little while ago, somebody up here standing up to the things been thrown our way this morning. We've been going through a battle. It's a test. I turned to Sybil and said, it'll all come out in the message. It'll all come out in the message. Listen, we all go through testing. We all go through hard times. This morning I once out somebody standing up and has opened a black book and beginning to sing songs that's touching somebody's heart. You know what? I was thinking about this in Sunday school too. I make mention several times in this series so far that faith is believing God. Do you realize that what happened in the garden, I've mentioned this before to you too, that what has happened in the garden was that Adam and Eve chose not to believe God, but to believe Satan. The thing is, in our testing, are we going to believe God? Or are we going to believe the world? Or are we going to believe Satan? Or who are we going to believe? Or are we going to believe the friends who have lied to us, who have believed the world, who have believed Satan? Who are we going to believe? Are we willing to believe God? I wrote in my notes a last point. In Romans chapter 11, chapter 8, Romans 8, and verse 11. The Bible says, but if the spirit of him that raised up Jesus from the dead dwell in you, he that raised up Christ from the dead shall also quicken your mortal bodies by his spirit that dwelleth in you. Abraham accounted that God was able to raise Isaac from the dead, and guess what? He could. And it's not about this life anyway, it's about what's going to come. And I really believe, I do believe that God is able to raise me from the dead. And I'm putting all my eggs in that basket. God is able. And I'd rather stay under the testing and pass that test than to believe Satan and follow his light lead. We get a song and everyone stands.